All right, I am ready when you are.
So good morning. Our group decided to go with controversial issues in education, and that is the topic that we chose. To start with, schools all across America have faced the issue of safety within their facilities. Kids struggle more and more to fit in, and they're denied the right to feel comfortable and safe in their environment. Throughout history and now in present day, students face the issue of violence within their schools. Teenage years are so very delicate, and the youth today face so many more pressures than they did back then. As a country, we haven't quite figured out how to handle these situations, and there are many new arising problems. Social media and technology are two of the main ones. Since teenagers are so attached to their phones nowadays, we have an issue with becoming isolated in ourselves and not expressing the way we feel and the way others are making us feel. While technology does have benefits, it also has many downfalls to it. Cyberbullying and peer pressure online hurts mental health, and this is a gateway to many more problems that our schools aren't really ready to face or handle. Since the 1970s, there have been over 1,300 school shootings, and these numbers are drastically growing each year. 93% of school shootings are planned events by students that feel they don't have an outlet for their emotions. They aren't able to feel comfortable and express themselves to trusted adults or even their peers. They hold it all in and they let it become a very much larger problem. Even though these numbers continue to grow, people who witness the warning signs and the scary parts that they see, such as bullying and violence in their schools, let the problem go unnoticed and unannounced. You may ask, what does all this have to do with school safety? And the answer is a lot.
Children who face bullying of any form are going to feel judged and ridiculed in the school environment. This is eventually going to lead to them acting out of anger and cause violence in a school setting. In 2017, there was a study, and it was on teenagers ages 12 to 18, and it's shown that 20% of those teenagers felt like they were bullied in a school environment. And that is just a number that's not including all the students that were too ashamed and too scared to stand up and say that they were bullied. So that number is really huge, but it's in the study it was so tiny because there are kids that are still too scared and they don't feel safe enough to speak up. To a student that's bullied, the reoccurring event of them being bullied is going to prevent them from learning properly in the school environment because they don't feel safe and they don't feel secure. And how are you going to learn somewhere that you don't even feel safe in? Any kind of bullying can make a child feel alone and lost. And once that occurs, students are often going to turn to other options like abusing drugs and abusing alcohol. Their mental health can take a heavy impact on this. You know, students, when they don't have a safe place to talk to a trusted adult, they're not going to know how to cope. You know, they're trying to cope and they don't have anybody to talk to. That's not going to help them learn in any way. The real issue with school safety is not the outsiders coming in, it's the people that are already within the school, the staff members and the students themselves. That's the real school safety issue. I think that oftentimes we forget that people do have inner struggles that they need to talk about, but they don't feel free to talk about. And when they don't talk about them, they just keep bottling up inside until they eventually just explode into a violent outburst. And a situation like Sandy Hook and other terrible tragedies that have happened in schools are going to keep occurring. The United States is not the only place that has mental health and school safety struggles. In the book I Am Malala, she's from Afghanistan. She faced violence and ridicule in her school environment, and she did not feel it was a safe place. And sometimes she even referred to it as a hostile environment that she couldn't learn in. And I do realize that it is different from there in the United States, but as students in America, it's an overall message that schools should be a safe place for us to learn and grow and interact, and they're not.
And as Kristen said, bullying in any form causes students to create a negative self-image of themselves and others. Studies show that in many instances, bullying leads to isolation within the student and the people around them. And in some cases, this arises lashing out and violence by the students. Children who are mistreated today can very well become the Adam Lanzas of the tomorrow, which that was the shooter at Sandy Hook Elementary School. Once someone is damaged mentally through bullying and or abuse, they lack the coping skills and have problem resolving conflict, both inner and outer.
Completely solving and fixing this problem may not be within our grasp for the time being. However, there are a few ways that we can begin to improve our schools and help the students that are struggling. School safety starts with the mental health of the students. Therefore, implementing school psychologists and specialists will improve the physical and psychological safety of the school. School psychologists sit down with students and conduct observations and interviews to make sure the students' needs are met and they have appropriate learning adjustments. They can meet with students on a routine basis for students who are uncomfortable to reach out first, and they will also receive the help that they need. School psychologists are specifically trained to advocate for initiatives that create supportive and safe learning environments that will naturally prevent violence. Some students are led to lash out when they are bullied. Bullying can provoke many mental health problems and can damage the academic performance of the overall school. Psychologists will help students have access to the support they need to be successful both inside and outside of the classroom. When students learn useful coping strategies, they tend to use them in their personal lives. Not all children know how to cope properly, and this can follow them all the way to adulthood. Therefore, having these psychologists there, they can also improve the mental health of the staff members too. Having clubs and organizations where students are free to open up about their daily problems will build trust within the school. Students will begin trusting staff members and other students, in return reducing violence. Overall, these solutions would make schools safer from the inside out.
As with all things, these solutions do have their limitations. Having clubs and organizations to teach and allow students to come forward with their own stories on school safety is a great thing. But not all students are going to feel compelled to come forward or to learn about school safety, and not all of them will feel comfortable with talking about it. That could cause the solution to take a while to get started, if it were ever able to get started at all, because students might not want to come forward. For our other solution, having psychologists and specially trained counselors, that's very expensive. The average cost of a psychologist is $70 to $150 per session. I found that information on Thurbo.com, which is a website that speaks about the different forms of therapy and their costs. Now, if you take that information, say 100 students came forward with something that was affecting their school safety. Maybe it was mental health, maybe it was bullying, but it was something that was affecting their school safety, and they came forward with it. With providing psychologists, say the school provided 5 sessions with a psychologist per student that came forward. At $70, which is the cheapest rate, that would be $35,000. That is very expensive, and the school board can't afford that, and they're likely not going to pay for it, which is something Mackenzie talked about in her paper. So if you take that information, you realize that it's very expensive for that. And where would we get the money? Would it come from donations? Would there be higher school fees? And what if multiple students came forward? Or maybe they needed more than 5 sessions and couldn't pay for it themselves. The other issue with having psychologists and specially trained counselors in our schools is that not everyone believes in counseling. Some people see it as a waste of time or just a way to trick people out of their money. Some parents might not let their children go and see these psychologists or speak with a school counselor for any reason other than academics. So if these people weren't coming forward and if enough people weren't taking advantage of these resources would then be taken away. And that would also be a waste of that money that is hard to come by. In this graph, which is from 2018, you can see budget cuts from all of these states in the U.S. This just is another thing that shows you that we don't have the money to have psychologists in our school unless something changed and there were donations or budgets were moved around. So in conclusion, we decided that having clubs and organizations in our schools would be the better option, just because it's cheaper and it would be similar to a support group. If any of you have heard of AA, the support group that helps alcohol addicts, it would be similar to that, where just people can come forward and seek the help that they need at a cheaper rate. And so that is the conclusion that we came to.
All right, good job. All right, Andy, give one specific way that your thinking changed as a result of learning about Brooklyn's findings.
Brooklyn brought in, with her paper, a lot of the limitations, and that was something that my paper was kind of lacking, and so was my thought process. But she really brought in the idea of money, and she also brought in the idea that school safety involves a lot of sexism, and that was a topic that I had not really thought of before falling under school safety.
All right, good job. Mackenzie, what is a way in which your team resolution makes you think differently about your own individual research?
Well, it made me think more about like extending my thoughts for mental health, and that there are other ways that schools are affected not just by mental health, but by what Andy said, like sexism and bullying and all of that.
Okay. All right, Kristen, if you had another team member, what other perspective or limitations could they have researched that would have made a useful contribution to the project?
I think that if we had another team member, the perspective that would be best would be from like an economy point of view, because whenever we found our graph, I thought it was very interesting to see how much resources do we have to provide more resources to our students. So if we could have a perspective from like someone who knows about economy, that would be perfect to get down and dirty into like the facts behind it. Like what can we do to really put an impact on to helping the mental health and helping the school safety.
Okay, thank you. And Brooklyn, reflecting on your colleagues' work, which one had the greatest impact on your overall understanding of the problem that your group identified?
Mackenzie's paper actually had the most effect on my understanding. Her perspective was on mental health, which I feel is one of the biggest issues that involves school safety. Because as we said in our presentation, most violence in schools are a result from mental health. Maybe they were depressed or anxious or just feeling ridiculed, but it all stemmed from mental health. And that's something that Mackenzie spoke a lot of in her paper.
All right, thanks guys, very good job.